Hi, my name is Leslie Kaplan. I'm Chair of the Somerset Communications Committee, and I'd like to welcome you to tonight's Town Talk, which will feature Doug Rand. And I'm going to let John Barry, who's been our coordinator for these, do the introduction.
I don't know quite how to introduce Doug. Other than to say he's been irritatingly good at every damn job he's done. and he's doing anything like that. Having come from an interesting background, which he will tell you, I hope. He's going to tell us, we all talk about and worry about illegal or undocumented immigration. And it's clearly hit Somerset. Look at the number of lawn companies that have ceased doing work right now. And Pat and I know of at least one building company that now won't send workers into DC for fear of encountering with ICE. So it's having an effect on all of them. But whether it's doing anything useful is another matter. But the fact is that legal immigration is is as complicated as messy. And so I will, at that point, having unburdening myself of what little I know, I'm going to tell you to Doug, and more of yours.
Thank you. Should I use a microphone or not? Yes, okay. Hello. Hello. Good evening, everyone. Thank you, John, for your kind introduction. And for trusting that I've actually done a good job. You're taking my word for it.
No, I read your CV.
Okay. So I think apparently the format for the Town Talks is I'll talk a little bit, hopefully not too long or boringly, about my story and some thoughts on the present moment, and then we'll have lots of time for Q&A. So please think of what you want to talk about. And I think this is being recorded, so I might have to tone down my expletives and other like strong feelings and keep it professional for this crowd. But thank you all for coming out. This is wonderful. So I recently left the Biden administration 3 days before Trump was inaugurated, as did my wife Daphna. We were both political appointees in that administration, and that's just part of the job, you know. What we didn't expect and what's been awful, and I'm sure it's touched everybody, is how the civil servants were treated, because they're not supposed to be kicked out or immiserated, depending on who's president. But I never would have thought 20 years ago that I would be like deep into our immigration system. I had no idea that's where my career would take me. When I met Daphna, we were living in New York, and I was running a small company that my brother and I had started. My joke is that we were such ruthless entrepreneurs that we wanted to make the most money possible. So we started a company at the intersection of theater and publishing. And we had an amazing experience, and that's a whole other story. But one thing led to another. I went back to school. I got a fellowship. I was lucky to work in federal public service for a year after law school. And I was fortunate enough to have as a mentor a guy named Tom Khalil, who worked at this, what I thought was, you've heard of Tom?
Yeah, I have, yeah.
Amazing, great, okay. Did you know that Tom Khalil, over 10 years ago, was the reason that DARPA got its initial money to fund mRNA research? That was a good call. That's the kind of guy he is. He thinks way further ahead than almost anyone else in government or in life. And I was just really fortunate to be working for him. And he brought me on board to work on, he said, well, you're an entrepreneur, you should work on entrepreneurship. What does that mean? He's like, well, go figure it out. There's small business policy. Every president since Eisenhower has had a small business policy, but Obama should have this was 2010. Obama should have a special policy for startups, for companies that are trying to grow really fast, not just in Silicon Valley, but all over the country. So go figure out what startups need, and we'll try to build some kind of initiative around that. I said, okay, great. So I was like early 30s. I had first job in Washington was like a I had a desk and actually I shared a desk in a room with like 12 other people. It was not sexy. There were like cables falling from the ceiling and everything. But the coolest thing was that to my right, there was an empty chair. And every once in a while, this 80-something-year-old man would come down from upstate New York because the director of the Office of Science and Technology Policy liked to have like smart scientists around. And people would whisper like, "Oh, it's him, it's him." It's like, well, who is this guy who sits next to me like a couple times a month? They're like, "Oh, that's Dick Garwin. He invented the hydrogen bomb." And I was like, wow. So I actually asked him out to coffee at one point. We were talking. And I was like, so I hear you invented the hydrogen bomb. He's like, that's not true. I was more the architect of the hydrogen bomb. Anyway, so that's the kind of place it was. And so I just started calling people outside government. I would say, hi, I'm working in the Obama White House, trying to help startups through federal government action. Like what's missing? Like, what should we be doing? What are we doing that we're not already working on? I expected people to say, oh, well, there's this tax issue that you should work on. Or I expected people to say, access to capital is too difficult. You got to make it easier for small startups. Or I expected people to say, here's something in the Code of Federal Regulations that's annoying and you should change it. But I got a little bit of that. But the thing I got overwhelmingly, every venture capitalist had to do, every startup founder, every smart engineer, everywhere in the country, they were like, oh, you want to help startup world? Can you fix immigration? Gasp. And I was very surprised by it, but it was a very consistent signal. So like within a month, I was like, I mean, we want to work on all this other stuff, but like every investor knew of a founder who couldn't stay here or couldn't make it here because of immigration obstacles. Like every engineer, went to school, at a great American university with somebody who couldn't stay here and they wanted to work with. And so this was just endemic. I didn't know anything about immigration. I didn't even take immigration law in graduate school. So I like very sheepishly knocked on the door of the office, in another building whose actual job was immigration policy, and actually knew what they were talking about. And I was like, hi, would you accept free labor? And they were very kind, and they like brought me under their wing. And so slowly but surely, I kind of like was dabbling in it, and got to work on some cool stuff. And they had their hands full. Like the immigration policy, as you have noticed, encompasses immense amounts of law and policy, everything from a startup founder trying to get a visa to enforcement priorities to border stuff and beyond. So they were happy to have free labor. So that 1-year fellowship turned into a 6-year adventure. I was there from 2010 until a couple of days before Trump was inaugurated the first time. And I got to work on all kinds of cool stuff, including the like unbelievable hope and then despair of the last attempt at comprehensive immigration reform. Which if you have questions about that, we can get into it later. But there was a moment. Who remembers this? Does anyone remember in 2013 when the Senate passed comprehensive immigration reform?
Yeah.
Does anyone remember how many votes it got from Democrats and Republicans? 68 votes out of 100, which is unthinkable now. And then it died in the House because Republicans wouldn't bring it up for a vote. That's another story, but it's very much connected to what's happening now and why it failed. So then, Dov and I got kicked out of government for the first time. And I kind of by accident started another company called Boundless that's basically TurboTax for immigration. We wanted to help people, particularly spouses of US citizens, get green cards more affordably. And that went reasonably well. It went a lot better after I left. They started really cranking. And they're like a decent sized company now, and it helped a lot of people, which is really gratifying. So then the opportunity arose to go back into government. And I was, at this point, I was like really excited about immigration policy and like how we had to rebuild because we thought it couldn't get worse, and we had to rebuild from this terrible administration that had tried to break everything. And so I went in to a federal agency. Well, so there's the Department of Homeland Security, which is a ridiculous agency that is like, I don't know, it was created after 9/11 on the theory that like we need all these agencies to be working smoothly together. So let's put them all together. Let's take the Secret Service and staple it to FEMA, and staple that to the Coast Guard, and staple that to the immigration functions, which is a little weird thing to do. But one thing that was smart that they did was they took all the immigration functions out of the Department of Justice and they split them up. So instead of the Immigration Naturalization Service, which many of you might recall from decades and decades ago, they split it up. They're like, all right, let's have the immigration cops be called ICE, Immigration and Customs Enforcement. Let's have the border people will call it Customs and Border Protection, and let's have the friendly part of the immigration system be separate: U.S. Citizenship and Immigration Services, the ones who do all the, when you think you were eligible for something, you apply for it, and the agency decides if you're eligible or not. And we don't carry guns, and like it's not an enforcement agency. It's just like applying for a benefit from the Veterans Administration or Medicare or whatever. So I thought that would be a great place to work. I got into the agency my first go around. And so I served as a senior advisor to the head of the agency, who is terrific. Her name's Ura Jadoo. She built a great team. My joke that's not funny with Daphna is that I won the lottery twice. I got to work with amazing mentors and amazing people who I love to work with. And everyone was really kind and mission driven, which is not the case in a lot of Daphna's professional experiences in foreign policy, but that's another story. So I was there for almost 4 years. There were a lot of incredible things that got done that I did not work on because they weren't in my lane, but it was awful, but Kabul fell, I think like the week I started, and just 2 weeks after my boss was confirmed imagine you're confirmed by the Senate to go rebuild this agency doing its normal work, and then you come in and 2 weeks later, there's tens of thousands of Afghan allies being like evacuated from Afghanistan. It's part of your job to get them here safely and make sure they are who they say they are. But when the government really wants to get behind something, I mean, obviously the fact that we had to evacuate Kabul is a disaster and a government failure, but getting a lot of our allies out of there was an all hands on deck effort that involved the military, the State Department, Department of Homeland Security, and people, civil servants primarily, really just didn't sleep for months and got these people to safety and to rebuild their lives here and in other places. So that was, I take no credit for that. I barely worked on it at all, but just seeing people work on that was really inspiring. The kinds of things I did work on were, I got to do more policy for scientists and engineers from other countries and international students, and that whole element of they call it the legal immigration system, which I don't love because it's not as simple as like there's legal and there's illegal. We can talk about that later. But say it like the immigrants we invited. Some people come here seeking safety, and that's still legal, even if they're claiming asylum. So we did a lot of policy change to help make it easier for global talent to come here and stay here. But I also just got to work on making the agency work better. We inherited an agency that was like out of money, almost broke, huge backlogs, just totally mismanaged, above and beyond the challenges of COVID. And by the end, we left it in a much better place. We had, work permits that had taken months to process were taking days. Citizenship took over a year when we got in. It was less than 6 months when we left. People taking the oath, immigrants becoming U.S. citizens, 3.5 million people in 4 years, which is more than any other presidential term in history. And that feels good because that's forever. There's a lot of policies I work on that are being destroyed, but the change in people's lives is enduring. So it was an incredible place to work. Less incredible now. Well, it's still incredible, but not in a good way. And then I was fortunate because when we got booted out of government the second time, my old boss, Tom Khalil, was waiting and invited me to join a new organization that he created, which is called Renaissance Philanthropy, which is basically a 501c3 nonprofit that tries to raise money from wealthy family offices. And basically it was just OSTP all over again, but with like rich people's money instead of your taxpayer money. So we do a bunch of things to try to advance social goals through science and technology, but my little piece of it is I'm back in the immigration world again, but the thesis is how can we facilitate more really talented people from all over the world to come here and stay here without relying on policy being good, right? So we don't lobby Congress. We don't try to get the Trump administration to see the light and suddenly do a 180. We are giving grants to organizations outside of government to kind of surround would-be immigrants and immigrants with the resources they need to succeed here. And that's a whole other set of stories. I'll give you one example to make it real, which I love. So we gave a grant to an organization that works with winners of something called the International Math Olympiad. This is like this insane global competition. It's in hundreds of countries. And if you're a high school student and you compete in the International Math Olympiad, you are like 0.001% percentile math talents. These are crazy problems you have to solve. The overwhelming majority of these kids would love to come here to study for their college degree, for their graduate degree, what have you. But very few of them get to do so because very few universities in the United States have tuition aid for international students. We get a lot of, there's 1.1 million international students. They're very smart, they're very talented. They're also wealthy enough to pay their own way. Like we just don't, as a society, we don't really do financial aid for international students. So what we funded was say, all right, well, we're not going to fix that overnight, and that would take a lot of money. But what we can do is we can work with this organization to identify talented undergrads who are doing they did the Math Olympiad. They're crazy smart at math. They're doing their undergraduate degrees in Bulgaria or Vietnam or Senegal or wherever they are. And then when they're done, we give them a free virtual accredited master's degree in data science, so that then they have this credential they can use to get their first job in the United States as a data scientist or some other specialist. So we kind of leap over the financial aid problem and just get them a job. So that's really exciting, and the demand for that has unfortunately been much bigger than the amount of people we can fund, but it's a proof of concept that will hopefully grow over time. So that's the kind of thing we're working on. Yeah, okay. I've talked long enough.
No, keep going. You're doing good. Give us your thoughts on where we are now.
Oh man.
It's being recorded.
Yeah, it's all being recorded. I mean, where we are now is obviously dramatically worse than where we were in the first Trump administration, across the board, not just in immigration. But immigration has kind of been the through line of Trump's movement since he first descended the golden escalator in 2015, right? Remember what was the first thing he said that got the biggest response was saying, the Mexico's sending us their worst people. I won't quote exactly what he said, it's disgusting. But it was clear from day one that this was someone who was going to say extremely harmful, racist, untrue things about immigrants as a way to rile up distrust and support from based on some of our worst impulses as an electorate. And it's just gotten worse ever since then. So things that obviously the first week of the first term you had the Muslim ban. How many people know that there's a new Muslim ban in effect right now? Anybody know that? Yeah, no one showed up at the airports this time. It was just one more thing out of like a gajillion things that have happened in the past 8 months. And actually it's even worse because not only did this new entry ban prevent people from Iran and a number of other Muslim countries from coming, they expanded it to a bunch of countries, mostly in sub-Saharan Africa. So now it's both a Muslim ban and an Africa ban, in keeping with the fact that if you're not white, you're not welcome. And I feel like we don't say that out loud enough, even though they're very proud of this now. Like, in Trump 1.0, it was an off the record Oval Office conversation where he infamously said, why would I want immigrants from Nigeria and other shithole countries? Like, I want more from Norway. Like, this is a thing the president actually said in the first term. And now it's policy, right? Now they just announced we're gonna have almost no refugees from other countries. Refugees meaning, to be clear, like they never stop and explain in the news like what's the difference between a refugee and asylee. Asylee is someone who comes here seeking safety without being invited, without being vetted, and you have to kind of scramble to vet them and make sure they have a real claim. And that's a messy thing that we should talk about because it kind of broke the Biden administration. But a refugee is somebody who's fled their home country, living in some country where they don't feel safe and have no future, either because they're in a refugee camp or because they're a second-class citizen, and the UN has said, you deserve protection, and we're gonna try to find you a new home, in a country that wants you. And it takes years to be fully vetted, and the likelihood of making it to the head of the line is incredibly small. So these are the people that we're not admitting anymore unless they're white, South African, Afrikaner farmers. So the mask is off. It's just full white supremacy. It always was, but now they're just shameless about it. And I think that this is something that I think a lot of people, not the fine, educated people in this room, but I'll give one example of how just people can't believe what's happening, right? I still have friends and colleagues in the tech industry, and I think people are still like, it's just so hard to believe how bad it is. Like, well, Trump's still got these tech bros on his team, who come from Silicon Valley, and they'll come through for legal immigrants, right? They'll come through for skilled immigrants. Like, no, guys, like, that's not going to happen. Like, there's a guy in charge of immigration for the Trump administration. His name is Stephen Miller. He's a white supremacist crazy person. He has been since he was 15. This is his life's mission. And you can read all the things he said and written, and all the things his colleagues have said and written. And they're not against illegal immigrants. They're against immigrants. And they're against immigrants because there's very few white immigrants. So they don't care if you're from India or China with like an advanced degree. And we saw this very profoundly even before Trump was inaugurated the second time, when I don't know if people saw this, but every once in a while the stuff I work on like becomes some huge front page story because Trump tweeted something ridiculous or Elon Musk tweeted something ridiculous, and like everyone in my family like sends me an article and is like, have you seen this? I'm like, yes, I've seen it. But there was this kerfuffle online where this is what actually happened, just to give you a sense of just how bad it is. Some people in the MAGA like troll, social media brigades noticed that there was a guy working in the Trump White House who's Indian American and is working on, crypto or something ridiculous. But he had tweeted something in the past saying like H-1Bs make America great, right? H-1Bs being like the typical visa for a skilled professional white collar worker, often in software, often from India. And they went bananas. They were like, how dare this guy who's like stealing American jobs encourage the stealing of more American jobs. And it got really fast. And then Elon Musk went online and said, H-1Bs have made America great. I stand by this guy. And so, and then it just got incredibly racist, incredibly fast. Guess what, guys? Guess which side is winning, right? Like, there's no cavalry coming. Like the tech people who threw in with Trump are never going to roll the nativists who are in charge. It's not going to happen. And you saw that just a few weeks ago with Trump's Oval Office thing about saying we're going to have slap $100,000 fee on H-1Bs, right? Which, by the way, I don't think is going to last. I think it's illegal on its face, and there's 2 lawsuits already. One from the Chamber of Commerce and one from unions, which just shows they'll piss everyone off if they want, maybe if they have to. But anyway, so it's real bad. There's no kind of immigration that this administration will support unless it's white Afrikaners. And I wish I were kidding, and I wish that were funny, but it's not. So it's an ugly time. We've been here before, almost exactly 100 years ago, and hopefully we'll get out of it, just like we did about 50 years ago. Yes.
Why do you think that is resonating now with people as it did a century ago? Because we are not the country we were a century ago.
Yeah.
In terms of our what we look like, our thing. Why is this? Is this coming back? Has it always been there? We didn't recognize it, or what is your thinking about it?
It's a great question. I don't want anyone to mistake me for an optimist. But I do think things are different now from 100 years ago. I think that, certainly my family, my mom's grandparents, many of you in this room, like came during the great wave of immigration through Ellis Island, the whole Megillah, at the turn, in the early 1900s. And that was incredibly enriching for the country, but it did create a backlash among white people from Northern and Western Europe who thought that the race was being polluted their words, not mine. This terrific book about this called The Guarded Gate that just walks through how eugenics and xenophobia kind of had this unholy rise together during the Ellis Island era, which culminated in 1924. A law was passed through Congress that basically said, if you're not from Northern or Western Europe, you're not coming. I mean, it was like 5 Greeks a year, 12 Jews, no Asians, really bad. Turned out to be deadly, given that nobody, you know, very few people could escape, you know, during Europe during World War II. It was awful, and it, you know, and it wasn't undone until LBJ signed into law our modern immigration system in 1965. But that passed through Congress with a majority, and it wasn't universally popular, but like they were riding a wave of xenophobia. I don't think Trump is riding a popular wave of xenophobia. I think you look at the polling, and you know, during the Biden administration, a majority of people thought he was failing on immigration. But what does immigration mean? They thought they just did, like a lot of people were coming over the border without permission. Now, technically, this was legal because they were claiming asylum, which you're allowed to do. And it's just, you know, we can talk more about that. I'm not apologizing. I think it was a big policy fail. And I think people lose their minds when they see a lack of control, right? I don't think unlike 100 years ago, I don't think most Americans are like, oh my God, the country is getting less white and I'm losing my mind. I think that's what 30 to 40% of the country is thinking that identifies as MAGA. I think that underlies a lot of what we're seeing, but it's nowhere close to a majority, right? And you see that in the polling. Like the second Trump comes in and starts rounding up immigrants who haven't committed crimes and putting masks on ICE agents, support for immigrants just bounces right back, right? Because when there's quiet on the border and people don't think, you know, immigration is scary and disorderly, people remember this is a big multi-ethnic country and the immigrants have always contributed. So again, it's not binary, right? But I don't think any of the policies that Trump is pursuing right now through executive action would make it through Congress. And he knows that. So I don't think that the country has fundamentally changed. I think he won fair and square. There was a particular moment in time, but I don't think he's got the country with him, or a majority of the country with him on these terrible policies.
Talk a little bit, if you would, about the Biden
Sure.
immigration failure.
Yeah, that's what I was gonna ask you.
Yeah.
He said he would sign that bill,
Yeah,
and Trump stopped it,
yeah.
and then he did nothing. What happened? He didn't seal the border. Why did he wait so long to seal the border?
Well, he did, he just waited too long.
Yeah, why did he wait so long?
This is a good question, and I'm not the most competent person to
I know
answer
you didn't work on it.
because I didn't work on it. But my joke is I had nosebleed seats to that whole thing that was going on over a period of all 4 years. And so take what I say with a grain of salt. I wasn't in the room, but I think that fundamentally, a couple things were going on. Number one, people forget this. It's easy to forget, but like fundamentally, what drives people to the United States in recent decades, basically in the past 10 years, is desperation, right? Not everybody has a valid asylum claim because it's a very high bar, but like people aren't coming here just to like, you know, bump their salary a little bit. They're coming from Venezuela, which is a failed state. They're coming from, they're coming from Central America, where things are really bad in certain countries. And there's cartels that are charging people $10,000, $20,000 to shepherd them, not shepherd is the wrong word, to like traffic them, you know, hundreds or even 1,000 miles. And it's a big business, right? So if you look at the numbers of people crossing the border without permission, it starts going, it's the first mini crisis was in 2014 in Obama times. And it's going up and up and up and up. And then it starts going crazy under Trump. The year before COVID, it was up and to the right. Does anyone remember this? Right? Despite all the things they did for deterrence, despite ripping children out of their mother's arms, people were still coming. Despite all of their terrible, like inhumane policies, people kept coming. That's the level of desperation, right? And then COVID started, and the one thing you can do to get quiet on the border is wreck your economy. So like when there's like no opportunities here, and also there's a raging pandemic, you know, the numbers like stopped. And then the Biden people came in, and we came out of COVID, and like the numbers just bounced right back to where they were, and then they got higher than they ever got before. Okay, so why didn't Biden do something? I think answer number one is, like, we have laws passed by Congress, and the laws passed by Congress say, if you get into the United States and you claim asylum, you have a right to due process. We can't just bounce you, right? And I'm oversimplifying, but like, you can't just wish that away. Now, we'll get to your question, which is like, well, then how come in June 2024, they did just get rid of the right to asylum, which is true. But I think that is a very legally dicey executive order. And it's still working its way through the courts, and it might not survive. Right? Because the asylum system was never designed for this level of numbers. It did create chaos. It did create, all kinds of problems that made people distrust the system. So I'm not defending the response. I'm just saying, like, Trump wasn't able to turn it off in Trump 1.0. Biden wasn't able to turn it off. He only was able to, quote unquote, turn it off in like the last 6 months of the administration by issuing an executive order, which grotesquely was based on the same legal authority as the Muslim ban, saying basically, when we have this many, when we have such and such many people crossing the border without permission, it's okay to exclude them. I think if you rewind the clock and try doing that on day one of the Biden administration, I doubt that survives in court for more than a couple months.
I had 2 asylum cases that I won. I know how the whole
Okay, I didn't know your
works or
backstory.
doesn't work. But the point remains, he said, I'll sign this law, which I gather had a lot of terrible stuff in it too. And then silence. When Trump said, don't pass it because I want it as a campaign issue.
But I don't understand
And I have the feeling that if he had done something earlier, we might be in a better situation. Right?
Oh, there's a lot of woulda, coulda, shouldas for sure that are very legitimate, but just in terms of the timeline, there's one thing I don't understand, and I want to make sure for people who aren't super nerds like apparently we are. It's like the numbers are going up and up and up. The Biden White House is freaking out. They see that it's a huge political liability. They've seen this for years. I'm like, they try one thing, the numbers go down a little bit, they go up again. They try another thing, the numbers go down a little bit, they try another thing. I mean, the story of the first 3 years is like, try something, it works. People, they think, pat themselves on the back, and then it stops working, right? Over and over and over again, until finally, at the end of 2023, Biden's top people start negotiating with some bipartisan senators to change the law to actually, restrict asylum through Congress, which is the right way to do it if you're going to do it, or at least the rock solid way of doing it if you're going to do it. And they negotiate for months and months and months and months, and then shocker, it all falls apart, which to me should have been predictable from the beginning. It falls apart primarily because Trump says, like, I don't want to give you a win. And so, which was obvious he would do that. But then a couple months later, Biden did issue an executive order and effectively stopped admitting asylees at the border. That was in June.
Was it only a couple months?
Yeah, it was just a couple months later. Now, why did they wait? Why did they enter into negotiations with Congress without realizing that was doom? Why did they wait a couple months later for like the timing of it? I can't explain. But I think it was, I would be the last person to say every decision that was made in the Biden administration was perfect. It can't be improved upon. Like, it was a big policy failure, what ultimately happened at the border. But it was based on the fact that, like, we are a nation of laws. And if you want to sincerely grapple with that and not just rule by fiat, it's really complicated and hard.
Now we hear about shortage of workers in agricultural,
Yeah.
who are not your average white collar, whatever.
Right.
What would be the rational way of handling that?
Well, I mean, here, I'm gonna step back for a second. There's a lot of ways we could talk about agricultural workers and so on and so forth, but I think it's easy to miss the forest for the trees. So, it's taken me a while to get to this point, but, something I think gets really, really lost, even in very thoughtful reporting and analysis of immigration, is this idea that, like, oh, well, we need immigrants to fill jobs that Americans won't do. Okay, and in agriculture, that's kind of true, right? Like if there was a grower who said at one point, like, either we import labor or we export our industry, right? It's like, Americans aren't gonna pick, lettuce, no matter how much you pay them. As a general matter, I'm not an economist, but anyway, there's a long way of saying, there's this immense amount of economics literature, that says pretty conclusively, over and over and over again, that like, labor markets are not zero sum. You bring in more people, whether they're farm workers or whether they're software engineers, and they don't just take a job, they also go to restaurants and buy groceries and contribute to their communities and make companies more innovative and make farms more, like almost every scenario that's ever been studied, US born workers do not lose their jobs or experience lower wages due to immigration, even when there's extreme spikes in immigration. Is this surprising to anybody? I feel like this is never reported. I feel like even pro-immigration reporters are all about like, well, there's a shortage in this industry, so we need the immigrants. It's like, no, we need more people, period. Like, here's a fun fact. Anyone want to guess when the Social Security fund is going to run out of money and start paying the incomplete benefits? Just raise your hand, shout out a guess. 2033, 20 what? 37, 2034. That's soon. That's soon. Anyone want to guess when US deaths will outnumber US births for the first time in history?
Next week.
Anyway, just shout out some guesses.
2030.
2030. How'd you know? Yes, 2030. That's 5 years. That's the next presidential term. People are going to wake up and see, oh my God, right? Like the US born population is shrinking and it's never going to stop shrinking. It's just not. You can't go back in a time machine and like have, and give all the pregnant moms baby boxes, right? And even if you did, that only has a marginal effect. So the only way we're going to grow our population is through immigration. And all the literature suggests that it's, yeah, it's great to have software engineers. They might give you a semi bigger tax or innovation mode, but really you just need working age people. You just need working age people and everything gets better. It really is extraordinary. You think of any other policy, right? Like taxes, there's winners and losers, and healthcare, there's winners and losers, and trade, tariffs and trade, there's winners and losers. With immigration, like we perceive it as those winners and losers, but there's really not. It's like, it's almost a free lunch. And I'm not making this up. It seems crazy. I sound like a crazy person. But I really think that, to get back to your earlier question, I think most Americans, like, they want to see order. They want to not be thinking about immigration. They don't want immigration to be on their top 10 lists of concerns. As long as it's not in their face, they'll be like, wait, how many immigrants do we let in? 5, 7, a million? Whatever, it's fine. Like, as long as they're getting on planes and coming to airports and being, duly vetted and working honest jobs, like, it's fine. Yes.
And how confident are you that in fact we are going to need more people?
With AI and all?
Automation, like at both the high and the low ends of the labor market?
I don't know. I mean, I honestly don't know. I'm not gonna put odds on this. I mean, yeah, maybe like everything's gonna be different this time and we're all gonna be, unemployed and just jacked into the matrix. Or maybe this will be like every other technology in history where somehow we all, learn new jobs and that didn't exist before. I don't know. But I don't know. I think even in a world where, again, it's so intuitive. Let me put it this way. It feels so intuitive. This isn't your point is just like there's not might not be that many jobs.
I mean, my
But-
point is there's no shortage right now of software engineers who are just out of college, right? Like,
Yeah, but I think that's a short-term thing.
And then if you look at what's happening with Amazon's forecast, like they want to stop hiring, right?
Yeah.
Reporting the Times this week suggests like they're trying to flatten their hiring curve. That is, they do not want to create any more job positions in the future.
That's true.
And so that.
Right, but that's Amazon and they're already gigantic.
But they're the biggest, yeah, they're the biggest employer.
Just self-driving trucks, and we'll need all the wrong.
This is all true. So I would say, look, there's a world where there's a world that we've never experienced before. That is a possibility. I don't know what odds to put on it. Or then there's the world that's like, mostly like what we've experienced before with some new technologies and some new challenges. You know, a lot of people in the horse industry lost their jobs when cars were invented, but you know, the job market didn't collapse. I don't mean to be, you know, cavalier about it. This is different, but we just don't know, right? What I was going to say before is, as a general matter, like, at least up until this point, and who knows what the future will bring, like, everyone generally wants more people. When you just say people, everyone will nod their heads, like, I don't care how MAGA, like, a small town mayor is, he or she would rather have their town growing than shrinking, right? Like, every mayor, every business leader, every governor, everybody would rather their communities be growing, not shrinking, right? And so when you say we need more people, everyone will be like, well, of course we want more people. But somehow when you say immigrant, one forgets that it's just a person. And suddenly like, oh, do we want more people? Also, like, let me just point out, like, we're really good at this as a country. This is a huge advantage we have over other countries. How many people want to immigrate to China? How many people want to immigrate? I mean, even India, like, very, very low immigration. And even countries that, you know, rich countries where people do want to immigrate, like in Europe and the UK, like, you know, they're a lot more racist than us, believe it or not, right? Like, they're not good at integrating people like we are. It really is different. Like, it is an unearned advantage we have as Americans, that we are like damn good at like welcoming people and like turning them into Americans. It's a real phenomenon that no other country that I know of has really ever replicated. And to just be like, you know, like right now, just ignore that and go in the exact opposite direction is such an incredible cell phone that it's kind of defies belief. But someone over here had a question. Yes.
You know, the other day when Canada ran that ad about terrorists, the Ronald Reagan, I kept thinking, they really want this Trump off. They should have run the Ronald Reagan speech about immigration.
It was his last speech before leaving office. Terrific speech.
Yeah, but my point is, politics has shifted, and I don't see it shifting back. So, way of framing my question would be, how do we get a Democratic candidate when we to say what Reagan said, or would your advice on immigration, right? Or would your advice be, we've lost, don't campaign on this issue? In other words, how do you build a political constituency?
Yeah.
To get back to.
I think, yeah, no, it's a great question. I know there's a lot of chatter about this, but I think we are overthinking it. First of all, I have no idea what the world's gonna look like 3 years from now, and nobody does. We don't know who's running. We don't know who's gonna be ahead. I think we'll laugh at all the assumptions we made, you know, in 2025. But I actually don't think this is that complicated, right? I mean, it's like what we said earlier, like the Reagan's message and Obama's message, and like a lot of leaders' message for years, like, works because it resonates with most people, not all people, but most people, which is like, we are a nation of immigrants. We want people to come here legally. We want more people to come here legally, and be incorporated into the fabric of the country. And we need to do it in an orderly way. And people who've been here, pillars of their communities for decades and decades and have never done anything wrong, we should give them a path to like get right with the law and welcome them into US citizenship as well. Like, I don't actually think that's been tarnished beyond repair. I think the biggest challenge I think campaigning on that is not going to be difficult. I think the reality of governing and being like, all right, now what do we do when we can't change the laws because Congress is still divided and we got to deal with, you know, border stuff again. I don't know the answer to that, but I think the message isn't complicated.
Switching gears a little bit, just back to like universities and international students and maybe science and technology specifically, like looking at the double of the lack of federal funding now for universities and research programs, and the like telling international students, don't come here, we don't want you, and we're the best. Like, that's what we're supposed to do. So when you look at that and you look at graduate programs that are being canceled and things like that, how do you think about then what we're good at, which is research and development of new companies and new ideas? And do you think like we're going to wipe this out the next 5 or 10 years? Like, how do you build that back when we've told everyone go away? We don't. Oh,
it's terrible. I mean, I think the damage is irreparable.
Really? No optimistic answer.
I think, look, there's a world in which we're like in a MAGA autocracy for decades. Like, things can get really bleak. I don't know, right? Or there's a world where like in 2029 we like get back on track and like and this ideology has been totally repudiated and like we rebuild again. I don't know, but I think like you can't pull funding from NIH and NSF and like repudiate a bunch of international students and then just like turn that back on. Like there are people who will die of diseases that would have lived. There are, innovations that would have happened that aren't going to happen. And no one's going to be held accountable for that because it's too hard to measure. So I think we can recover in the long run, but just kind of like, when we said nobody can come unless you're from Northern or Western Europe for 40 years, like imagine what a richer, bigger, more dynamic country we would be if that had never happened, but we'll never know. The damage was irreparable, but, we managed to thrive at a lower level than we would have if we could go back in time and change that.
Andrew,
Thanks for doing this, Doug. Really interesting. I know it's not your lane, but the issue that I think really tugs at a lot of our hearts is the mistreatment of people in our communities.
Yeah.
And the terrorizing of people who are here with status or who are American.
Yeah.
As well as people who don't have status. I'm just curious, can you talk us through just spontaneously what the second order or third order consequences are of becoming a country that has that kind of lawlessness? And, what does that mean sort of more broadly for us in this society?
It's bad, it's real bad. I'll tell you, it's ugly as hell. I mean, it's a stain on the country. It's something that our kids and grandkids will be learning about in history books, about this dark period, when masked agents were, whisking people off the streets and putting them in detention centers, which is basically prison with no rights, and sending them to like halfway across the world to places where they could be tortured. I mean, it's awful. It's absolutely awful. It's absolutely disgusting and conscience shocking. Any way you look at it. And it serves nobody, right? I mean, like nobody is benefiting from this. Even the people who, are, I think there's a smaller and smaller number of people with each passing day that are for this. But I think, I don't know if it's answering your question. I mean, I'm not saying anything's an obvious. It's all, does anybody know how much money ICE got to, in the big ugly bill?
800 billion.
Well, not 800 billion. I mean, it's about 75 billion over 4 years, right? Which is just a ridiculous amount of money. I just want you to like stop for a second and think about like all the fights over money that Congress has had the entire time we've been alive. And then like just kind of overnight, as if like Trump and Stephen Miller are like, we want to hire 10,000 ICE officers and like add 50,000 detention beds, and that's going to cost, somewhere in the neighborhood of $100 billion. And like Congress is like, okay, but think what we could buy with that. I mean, it's crazy. So again, I'm not an optimist, but if there's any silver lining, it's like, and this is a small silver lining, but I think what's going on is so disgusting and so manifestly against our values that the pendulum's going to swing back really hard. If they don't eliminate the pendulum, which I'm worried about. Yes.
It's kind of touching on that, but I feel like, historically we viewed immigrants as like, as far as Fox News, they got the caravan.
Yeah.
I'm from California. Every time we were there, like, we had to Save Our State off on 7. And I feel like because they're so marginalized, because like, they're disenfranchised, they become these targets. And I would love to see some more leadership when it comes to immigration. I feel like Democrats historically have been like, we don't want to touch it, we don't want to talk about it. And it's like, let's come out, let's say like immigrants are what makes the country great. Let's, really like bring that front and center. And I think the racism and the cruelty has really been deal with all of this, in the last couple of years. But like, I mean, do you see leadership happening on this?
Yeah, I mean, I think first it's important to recognize that like the Democrats are in a leaderless period right now, which always happens, in between cycles. And so of course it feels like there's no leadership because like no one's leading the party, right? And, but I mean, when you look at the, individual members of Congress and others who are like, have a really hard time breaking through. Alex Padilla, the senator from California, I mean, has been incredibly strong on these issues and has like put his body on the line, and I think you're gonna see more and more of that. I think it might not be obvious right now because we're just in like a fire hose of crazy right now, and it's hard to pay attention to anything. I mean, I don't think you're wrong. I mean, I think there's a very predictable, very irritating, like eating our own clash right now between factions in the Democratic Party, where like the moderates are like, we all need to be more moderate, and then the progressives are like, we all need to be more progressive, and it's like, look, if you're running for mayor of New York, you need to be really progressive, and if you're running for senator from Arizona, yeah, you need to be moderate. Like, this is not hard to reconcile. I don't understand it. But I think over time, as things get uglier, and as the economy sours, and as communities are suffering, like, it's not gonna be controversial for whoever the next leader of the Democrats is to be like really strong in immigration. And I think we forget, like, that's exactly what happened last time, right? I mean, Biden campaigned on like how, it's like family separation was a moral stain, and like remain in Mexico was a moral stain, where you had people, living in shanties on the Mexican side, waiting for their due process. Now things didn't turn out great in terms of implementation, but I think that's what people are going to want to hear after, unfortunately, several more years of this.
I agree with you about the real problem is people didn't feel there was a control, and the other issue is crime. Somehow, the next immigration policy has to have a part of it that we will vet people and these will not be criminals, because people are afraid of it.
Well, okay, so I'll connect these 2 points, in terms of what we talk about. How many people are aware of what the deportation policy was under Biden and Obama? Like we deported a lot of people. Who were we deporting? Anyone? Criminals. The entire point was to say, look, we have so many ICE agents, we have so many detention beds, we can deport maximum 400,000 people a year. So instead of going after like groundskeepers and like random people in Home Depot, let's set ICE, let's say, hey, ICE, you really seriously, you're only allowed to deport people with a criminal record. And they hated it. They hated it. ICE agents were in open revolt over this. ICE leadership was in open revolt over this, but eventually they got with the program, and deportation numbers were high, but it was very, very heavily skewed towards people with criminal records. And how many people in America knew that? Nobody. And so that enables Trump to come and say like, well, they're all criminals, and Democrats aren't deporting them, so I'm going to come in and deport the criminals. And then a lot of people are waking up who voted for Trump and be like, wait a minute, these aren't criminals. What are you talking about? But I still think most people don't realize that, like, we're less safe because not only is ICE going after people, every time ICE goes after like someone in a Home Depot parking lot, they're ignoring somebody who's harder to catch and who's actually more dangerous. And what makes it even worse is now they're pulling like FBI and ATF and DEA agents off their normal work and telling them to go to Home Depot and stop catching really serious bag. I mean, it's insane how much less safe we are because of this single-minded focus on wanting to deport grandmas and high school students. But getting back to Victoria's point, like, as Democrats, we were always, I think, a little afraid to just say, like, I mean, Obama said it. I mean, presidents say a lot of things, not everything breaks through. But we were never comfortable like chest thumping and being like, we deported 400,000 hardened criminals this year, right? Which was true, more or less, right? But that's just not how we talk. Maybe we have to learn to talk that way. Anyway, my point being, like, this is all messaging. Like there in no way, shape, or form is Trump making us safer or deporting more criminals. Yeah.
It has to be vetted people, right? And the border has to be controlled.
Well,
Yes.
Do you think the border is controllable? Because I am thinking about in future decades with climate change and migration from hotter areas, less livable areas of the world. countries like the United States are gonna see more and more immigration, not less and less?
So it's a good question. I don't think the future, that particular future is knowable, but I do want to make one point that I think was lost on, you know, again, I'm not an expert in global migration, but some of my best friends are. And I would venture to guess that most people, like, no matter how many articles they've read, have not been taught the difference between what it meant to not control the border in the 90s versus now. Right? So like, in our minds, probably since, you know, most of us were, you know, maybe not Jonah, but like, you remember the 90s was like, oh, like Mexican men sneaking across the border to like, you know, work under the table, right? It was people sneaking across the border. And that idea of people sneaking across, I think, is deeply embedded. No one's sneaking across the border in the last 10 years. They're coming right across and like looking for a border patrol agent to declare themselves to and say, I'm here, I'm on US soil, I will be persecuted if you return me, I want my due process. I'm oversimplifying, but that is a radically different thing, right? So in terms of like controlling the border, if controlling the border means like preventing anyone from sneaking across, like that can't be done. It doesn't matter what kind of wall you build or whatever. But that's not actually the problem we have, right? The problem we have is desperate people trying to, you know, use the laws that are available to them to flee, you know, ruined countries and not be killed. And so when you have huge numbers of those people coming, like you can turn them away. That's physically possible, right? But what does that mean about it? What does that mean about us, right? Like it's more of a question of values than it is about like the laws of physics. You know what I'm saying? But it is a wicked problem because I don't think no one in America signed up for, you know, hundreds of thousands of people, you know, a month showing up and saying, give me my due process. We just, you know, we never had the resources to handle that. Yes.
Yeah, I wanted to come back to your point about small town mayors and needing more population and so on. But I think that, and I don't dispute that, I think that's correct, but I think that it's in tension, that argument lies in tension with a certain level of discomfort with greater racial diversity in the US. And so I think, yes, I'm sure there are many small town mayors all over the country who would want growing populations if they just didn't look in a certain way, didn't pray in a certain way. Yeah. I think that's, and even if a mayor would suppress that thought, the mayor does have to think about the views of the Confederate flying people in their constituency. And so I think there are enough of those in the US that whatever way the pendulum shifts in the future, I personally think the US will have to come to terms with the fact that it can't be as welcoming, as open as it has been for the last 60 odd years. Because of the likelihood of that kind of backlash.
Well, I mean,
because I think there is an undercurrent of racism in the US, and that's
always has
as
been.
you say, the people who are going to come to the US are not going to be coming from Europe. Also.
Right. I mean, look, I'm a middle-aged white man, so it's not my place to expound on what it's like to be brown and black in a small town. But I think that one of the things that gives me some hope that we're not irredeemably lost is the fact that like xenophobia always loses, right? Like in a sense, in a really way I find hilarious. I don't think the xenophobes would. They're right about one big thing and they're wrong about one big thing. Let's turn the clock back to like pre-1924. Like if we came back to Somerset in a time machine, right? I bet a lot of people in this audience would be like, yeah, I don't know, like the greatest race the world has ever known. Like I read this book. It was like the equivalent of listening to a podcast. Like there's these really popular books about how like what, a certain kind of white person settled this country, and I don't know about all these newcomers. It was like a very, very mainstream, very like New York Times reading way to think, right? And in a way, all their worst nightmares came true. Because look around, right? How many people here have Italian heritage, Jewish heritage, Greek heritage? Like these were the dregs of Europe, right? Like all their nightmares came true. We are like a mongrel country, right? Even among white people. Where they were wrong is that would be bad, right? Like, and that just happens generation after generation after generation. So, like, yeah, like people, like young people in America right now are already majority minority. Like it's over. Like the Great Replacement, I'm saying that facetiously. It's done. It's happening, right? Like white people are not going to be the majority anymore in this country in the 2040s, and there's nothing Stephen Miller can do about it. Everything he's trying to do is just like, just like the last pathetic gasps of like an unreconstructed racist. It's not going to work, right? Like the die is cast. We are a multi-ethnic country, and the question is, are we going to be a multi-ethnic democracy? And the biggest xenophobia is coming from the places with the fewest immigrants. And it's directed against a faceless other and not the immigrants who actually live in the communities. Like, think of all the stories we've read over the past eight months of like some small town with like the beloved, Chinese restaurant owner who got deported, and like all these people who voted for Trump are like rallying behind this person. Like nobody hates the person next to them. The town in what was it, Springfield, Ohio? Like that mayor was like defending the Haitian immigrants who were not actually eating pets, right? Like I don't think people are actually anti-immigrant on a person-to-person level. I think it's easy to make people afraid of an other that has no face and that is dehumanized. And so I don't think we're doomed. I think there is a better future that is possible. I don't know if we're gonna get there. There's also a worse future that's possible. But I don't believe that like, that I guess maybe this is motivated reasoning. Maybe we can end on this. But like many of you, I think, it was a real shock to the system when Trump won the first time. It was like, well, he didn't win the popular vote. So I still understand this country. This is, right? But when he won this time, with more votes, fair and square, no electoral college shenanigans necessary, I think that was just like a gut punch. Like, what is this country? What is this country? And I feel like I've come to terms with that more over the last 8 months as I've seen, because a lot of the people who voted for him do not like what he's doing to immigrants, and a lot of other things too, right? Like a lot of people who voted for him are like rah rah and love this stuff, and that's just a fact of life. It's the human condition. You're always going to have some people with authoritarian tendencies, but I think what got him into office was people who were just like busy and not reading the news and not paying attention, and their eggs were expensive, right? And they thought he was going to deport hardcore criminals. And now they're like, what? And you see this in the polling. Like he's underwater on immigration issues. So I do think I can still understand. I feel like this is still my country and I can still understand it. And like we've always had an ugly past and present and future, but it doesn't have to be our destiny. How's that? Thank you all for inviting me. Have a wonderful evening.
That was great. Thank you.
Do you think